The Spanish Civil War was a military conflict fought from 1936 to 1939 between the Republicans and the Nationalists. Republicans were loyal to the left-leaning Popular Front government of the Second Spanish Republic and consisted of various socialist, communist, separatist, anarchist and republican parties, some of which had opposed the government in the pre-war period. The opposing nationalists were an alliance of phalangists, monarchists, conservatives and traditionalists led by a military junta among whom General Francisco Franco quickly achieved a predominant role. Due to the international political climate at the time, the war had many facets and was variously viewed as class struggle, a religious struggle, a struggle between dictatorship and republican democracy, between revolution and counter-revolution, and between fascism and communism. According to Claude Bowers, US ambassador to Spain during the war, it was the dress rehearsal for World War II. The Nationalists won the war, which ended in early 1939 and ruled Spain until Franco's death in November 1975. The nationalist forces received munitions, soldiers and air support from fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, while the Republican side received support from the Soviet Union and Mexico. Other countries such as the United Kingdom, France and the United States continued to recognize the Republican government but followed an official policy of non-intervention. Despite this policy, tens of thousands of citizens from non-interventionist countries directly participated in the conflict. They fought mostly in the pro-Republican international brigades, which also included several thousand exiles from pro-nationalist regimes. Throughout the course of the Spanish Civil War, people all over the world were exposed to the goings-on and effects of it on its people, not only through standard art, but also through propaganda. Motion pictures, posters, books, radio programs and leaflets are a few examples of this media art that was so influential during the war. Produced by both nationalists and Republicans, propaganda allowed Spaniards a way to spread awareness about their war all over the world. A film co-produced by famous early 20th century authors such as Ernest Hemingway and Lillian Hellman was used as a way to advertise Spain's need for military and monetary aid. This film, The Spanish Earth, premiered in America in July 1937. In 1938, George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, a personal account of his experience and observations in the war, was published in the United Kingdom. He lay flat on the brown, pine-needled floor of the forest. His chin on his folded arms, and high overhead the wind blew in the tops of the pine trees. The mountainside sloped gently where he lay, but below it was steep and he could see the dark of the oiled road winding through the pass. There was a stream alongside the road, and far down the pass he saw a mill beside the stream and the falling water of the dam, white in the summer sunlight. "Is that the mill?" he asked. "Yes. I do not remember it. It was built since you were here. The old mill is farther down, much below the pass." He spread the photostated military map out on the forest floor and looked at it carefully. The old man looked over his shoulder. He was a short and solid old man in a black peasant smock and grey iron stiff trousers, and he wore rope-soled shoes. He was breathing heavily from the climb, and his hand rested on one of the two heavy packs they had been carrying. "Then you cannot see the bridge from here?" "No," the old man said. "This is the easy country of the pass, where the stream flows gently. Below, where the road turns out of sight in the trees, it drops suddenly and there is a steep gorge. I remember. Across this gorge is the bridge. And where are their posts? There is a post at the mill that you see there. The young man who was studying the country took his glasses from the pocket of his faded khaki flannel shirt, wiped the lenses with a handkerchief, screwed the eyepieces around until the boards of the mill showed suddenly clearly, and he saw the wooden bench beside the door, the huge pile of sawdust that rose behind the open shed where the circular saw was, and a stretch of the flume that brought the logs down from the mountainside on the other bank of the stream. The stream showed clear and smooth looking in the glasses, and below the curl of the falling water, the spray from the dam was blowing in the wind. There is no sentry. There is smoke coming from the mill house, the old man said. There are also clothes hanging on a line. I see them, but I do not see any sentry. Perhaps he is in the shade, the old man explained. It is hot there now. He would be in the shadow at the end we do not see. Probably. Where is the next post? Below the bridge. It is at the road mender's hut at kilometre 5 from the top of the pass. How many men are here? He pointed at the mill. Perhaps 4 and a corporal. And below? More. I will find out. And at the bridge? Always 2, 1 at each end. We will need a certain number of men, he said. How many men can you get? I can bring as many men as you wish, the old man said. There are many men now here in the hills. How many? There are more than 100, but they are in small bands. How many men will you need? I will let you know when we have studied the bridge. Do you wish to study it now? No. Now I wish to go where we will hide this explosive until it is time. I would like to have it hidden in utmost security at a distance no greater than half an hour from the bridge, if that is possible. That is simple, the old man said. From where we are going, it will be all downhill to the bridge, but now we must climb a little in seriousness to get there. Are you hungry? Yes, the young man said, but we will eat later. How are you called? I have forgotten. It was a bad sign to him that he had forgotten. Anselmo, the old man said. I am called Anselmo, and I come from Barco di Avila. Let me help you with that pack. The young man, who was tall and thin, with sun-streaked fair hair and a wind and sunburned face, who wore the sun-faded flannel shirt, a pair of peasant's trousers and rope-soled shoes, leaned over, put his arm through one of the leather-packed straps and swung the heavy pack up onto his shoulders. He worked his arm through the other strap and settled the weight of the pack against his back. His shirt was still wet from where the pack had rested. I have it up now, he said. How do we go? We climb. The whole experience of being hit by a bullet is very interesting, and I think worth describing in detail. Roughly speaking, it was the sensation of being at the centre of an explosion. There seemed to be a loud bang and a blinding flash of light all around me, and I felt a tremendous shock. No pain, only a violent shock, such as you get from an electric terminal. With it a sense of utter weakness, a feeling of being stricken and shriveled up to nothing. The sandbags in front of me receded into immense distance. I fancy you would feel much the same if you were struck by lightning. I knew immediately that I was hit, but because of the seeming bang and flash, I thought it was a rifle nearby that had gone off accidentally and shot me. All this happened in a space of time much less than a second. The next moment my knees crumpled up and I was falling, my head hitting the ground with a violent bang which, to my relief, did not hurt. I had a numb, dazed feeling and consciousness of being very badly hurt, but no pain in the ordinary sense. For him it was a dark passage which led to nowhere, then again to nowhere. Once again to nowhere, always and forever to nowhere, heavy on the elbows in the earth to nowhere, dark, never any end to nowhere, hung on all time, always to unknowing nowhere, this time and again for always to nowhere, now not to be born once again always and to nowhere, now beyond all bearing, up, and into nowhere, suddenly, scaldingly, holdingly, all nowhere gone, and time absolutely still, and they were both there, time having stopped, and he felt the earth move out and away from under them. All the war propaganda, all the screaming and lies and hatred comes invariably from people who are not fighting. If we win here, we will win everywhere. The world is a fine place and worth the fighting for, and I hate very much to leave it. If you had asked me why I had joined the militia, I should have answered, to fight against fascism. And if you had asked me what I was fighting for, I should have answered, common decency. Are you a communist? No, I am an anti-fascist. For a long time, since I have understood fascism. The human louse somewhat resembles a tiny lobster, and he lives chiefly in your trousers. Short of burning all your clothes, there is no known way of getting rid of him. Down the seams of your trousers he lays his glittering white eggs like tiny grains of rice, which hatch out and breed families of their own at horrible speed. I think pacifists might find it helpful to illustrate their pamphlets with enlarged photographs of lice. Glory of war indeed. In war all soldiers are lousy, at the least when it is warm enough. The men that fought at Verdun, at Waterloo, at Flodden, at Senlac, at Thermopylae, every one of them had lice crawling over his testicles. Never think that war, no matter how necessary nor how justified, is not a crime. Ask the infantry and ask the dead. It is the same in all wars. The soldiers do the fighting, the journalists do the shouting, and no true patriot ever gets near a frontline trench except on the briefest of propaganda tours. You have never heard me talk much, but an intelligent man is sometimes forced to be drunk to spend his time with fools. The fact is that every war suffers a kind of progressive degradation with every month that it continues, because such things as individual liberty and a truthful press are simply not compatible with military efficiency. I had an inheritance from my father, It was the moon and the sun, and though I roam all over the world, the spending of it's never done. Early in life, I've noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper. But in Spain, for the first time, I saw newspaper reports which did not bear any relation to the facts, not even the relationship which is implied in an ordinary lie. I saw great battles reported where there had been no fighting, and complete silence where hundreds of men had been killed. I saw troops who had fought bravely denounced as cowards and traitors, and others who had never seen a shot fired hailed as heroes of imaginary victories. And I saw newspapers in London retelling these lies, and eager intellectuals building emotional superstructures over events that never happened. I saw, in fact, history being written not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened according to various party lines. Dying was nothing, and he had no picture of it nor fear of it in his mind, but living was a field of grain blowing in the wind on the side of a hill. Living was a hawk in the sky. Living was an earthen jar of water in the dust of the threshing with the grain flailed out and the chaff blowing. Living was a horse between your legs and a carbine under one leg and a hill and a valley and a stream with trees along it and the far side of the valley and the hills beyond. No animal has more liberty than the cat, but it buries the mess it makes. The cat is the best anarchist. The industrial towns were far away, a smudge of smoke and misery hidden by the curve of the earth's surface. Down here it was still the England I had known in my childhood. The railway cuttings smothered in wild flowers, the deep meadows where the great shining horses browse and meditate, the slow-moving streams bordered by willows, the green bosoms of the elms, the larkspurs in the cottage gardens, and then the huge peaceful wilderness of outer London, the barges on the miry river, the familiar streets, the posters telling of cricket matches and royal weddings, the men in bowler hats, the pigeons in Trafalgar Square, the red buses, the blue policemen, all sleeping the deep, deep sleep of England, from which I sometimes fear that we shall never wake till we are jerked out of it by the roar of bombs. They laid me down again while someone fetched a stretcher. As soon as I knew that the bullet had gone clean through my neck, I took it for granted that I was done for. I had never heard of a man or an animal getting a bullet through the middle of the neck and surviving it. The blood was dribbling out of the corner of my mouth. The artery's gone, I thought. I wondered how long you last when your carotid artery is cut. Not many minutes, presumably. Everything was very blurry. There must have been about 2 minutes during which I assumed that I was killed. And that too was interesting. I mean, it is interesting to know what your thoughts would be at such a time. My first thought, conventionally enough, was for my wife. My second was a violent resentment at having to leave this world which, when all is said and done, suits me so well. I had time to feel this very vividly. The stupid mischance infuriated me. The meaninglessness of it. To be bumped off, not even in battle, but in this stale coma of the trenches, thanks to a moment's carelessness. I thought too of the man who had shot me. Wondered what he was like, whether he was a Spaniard or a foreigner, whether he knew he had got me and so forth. I could not feel any resentment against him. I reflected that as he was a fascist, I would have killed him if I could, but if they had been taken prisoner and brought before me at this moment, I would merely have congratulated him on his good shooting. It may be, though, that if you were really dying, your thoughts would be quite different. There are many who do not know they are fascists, but will find it out when the time comes. He was just a coward, and that was the worst luck any man could have. And if you wait and hold them up even a little while, or just get the officer, that may make all the difference. One thing well done can make. All right, he said, and he lay very quietly and tried to hold on to himself, that he felt slipping away from himself as you feel snow starting to slip sometimes on a mountain slope. And he said, now quietly, then let me just last until they come. Robert Jordan's luck held very good because he saw just then the cavalry ride out of the timber and cross the road. He watched them come riding up the slope. He saw the trooper who stopped by the grey horse and shouted to the officer who rode over to him. He watched them both looking down at the grey horse. They recognised him, of course. He and his rider had been missing since the early morning of the day before. Robert Jordan saw them there on the slope, close to him now, and below he saw the road and the bridge and the long lines of vehicles below it. He was completely integrated now, and he took a good long look at everything. Then he looked up at the sky. There were big white clouds in it. He touched the palm of his hand against the pine needles where he lay, and he touched the bark of the pine trunk that he lay behind. Then he rested easily as he could with his two elbows in the pine needles and the muzzle of the submachine gun resting against the trunk of the pine tree. As the officer came trotting now on the trail of the horses of the band, he would pass 20 yards below where Robert Jordan lay. At that distance there would be no problem. The officer was Lieutenant Barrendo. He had come up from La Granja, where they had been ordered up after the first report of the attack on the lower post. They had ridden hard and had then had to swing back because the bridge had been blown, to cross the gorge high above and come around through the timber. Their horses were wet and blown, and they had to be urged into the trot. Lieutenant Barrendo, watching the trail, came riding up, his thin face serious and grave. His submachine gun lay across his saddle in the crook of his left arm. Robert Jordan lay behind the tree, holding on to himself very carefully and delicately to keep his hands steady. He was waiting until the officer reached the sunlit place where the first trees of the pine forest joined the green slope of the meadow. He could feel his heart beating against the pine needle floor of the forest.